The Five Nights at Treasure Island V2 mod just dropped recently, and this mod is based on the first good FNAF game, obviously called Five Nights at Treasure Island. Some of you may also remember the creepypasta that this game was based on, called Abandoned by Disney, which was created by a person named Slimebeast. Now, in the backstory of the creepypasta, we learned that Disney made two resorts back in the 90s, one in the Bahamas called Treasure Island, and the other one on the Emerald Isles called Mowgli's Palace, which took a lot of inspiration from the Jungle Book. Now, even though both of these resorts got shut down at the same time, the one that's important here is going to be Mowgli's Palace, which really never had a chance to take off because a lot of people in North Carolina disapproved of Disney even trying to make a resort in the first place. Mostly because the locals hated the idea of this corporation taking over the Emerald Isles and then turning it into a tourist trap. And just for a little insight, even now in 2024, the Emerald Isles are still described as being a peaceful, uncomplicated, and most importantly, non-touristy. But even though people were obviously opposed to this, Disney went ahead and built the resort anyway. But as stated earlier, it didn't actually stay open for very long. The entire resort was completely shut down suddenly, and nobody could really find any information as to why, because Disney wasn't giving out any details and the locals wouldn't talk about it at all either. Now, this is where the story's protagonist comes in, and since he only lived 4 hours away from Mowgli's Palace, he decided to go investigate for himself and see if he could find any clues as to why the resort shut down. When he arrived, he found what one would expect from a resort that had been closed down for years. The place looked a mess, and a bunch of grass and other plants had grown over much of the area. It honestly looked like a zone out of The Last of Us. And it also looked like the place had been looted for the most part, but our protagonist did find something interesting as he walked into a room. He found what he thought were just a bunch of mascot costumes, and as he looked around and tried to take pictures, he noticed that a strange inverted Mickey suit started to stand up. And then it asked him, "Want to see my head come off?" Being rightfully terrified, the protagonist ran away while also hearing the sound of Mickey ripping off his own head in the background and then spewing this weird yellow liquid on the ground. Needless to say, the protagonist now understood why Disney shut down the resort and also why nobody would talk about this place. And of course, this creepypasta is what inspired the series of Five Nights at Treasure Island games that have been released off and on over like the last 11 years or so. Now that we understand the backstory of the creepypasta, let's break down each character that pops up in the mod, starting with Boyfriend. Now, he takes the place of Jake Smith, who was basically like the Night Watchman from the original FNAF game. And now Boyfriend is basically trapped in this place and he has to survive long enough for help to arrive. All the while, various mascots are trying to kill him. The first threat being Photo Negative Mickey, which is basically the same as the Mickey from the original creepypasta that I just went over. But as we get into the third night, we also see Oswald start to pop up, and he's based off Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, who is known as the first Disney tune. And in some of the lore, he's even described as being like Mickey Mouse's brother. Now, in the Five Nights at Treasure Island game, we see that he likes to hide in the dark, which is why we see him standing like in the shadows in the FNF mod. We also see Minnie pop up, who is called Impurity in the Treasure Island universe. And just like the other tunes, she's also very deformed, but what separates her from the others is that she's constantly questioning her own existence, saying that this is not what life is supposed to be. And the thing that all three of these tunes have in common is that the only way to get rid of them is if you shut off the camera. Next, we see a character called Undying pop up, and he's probably the character that most closely resembles Mickey Mouse because he's relatively whole. But one thing that does stand out about him is that his eyes are completely black, implying that there is nothing actually inside of his suit. It's also implied in the original game that the intern before Jake, who was named Henry Miller, was killed by Undying. Which makes sense considering that Henry went missing around an area called Pirate's Cavern, which is where Undying used to patrol. And spoilers for you that haven't played the latest version of this game, but at the end of that game, we actually see a cutscene that reveals that Henry is the person that has been kind of guiding and giving you hints all along.
You know, Jake, I really had my doubts about you. I mean, after everything that happened, after what they did, and then they sent you here, who wouldn't? But you impressed me. You really did. I was angry at first. Angry about being lied to, about them putting me into that situation. I mean, they got me killed. Can you really blame me? And realizing that this had been happening over and over on a scope greater than anyone can ever comprehend. And I'm always the one who gets the worst of it.
Next, we have Goofy, who is called Acephalus, which means to not have a head. And I think looking at this, you can all probably guess why he has that name. I always thought that this guy was super creepy because even though he can't see or hear you, he can technically track you by any vibrations, meaning that if you are moving around, he can feel it and he will come after you. And opposite to him, we have a character called Disembodied, which is just Donald's head. And this guy's a real pain because when he pops up, he increases the likelihood of other tunes coming up, and he also makes a bunch of noise and he obstructs your vision, which is pretty close to what he did in the original game as well. Next we have a character called Face, and this guy stands out for two reasons. The first being his creepy human-like eyes, which no other tune has, and the fact that the only way to get rid of him is to cut off the lights. The last major character in the mod is called Hourglass, and he's basically a combination of all the other tunes. And I mean that literally. All the tunes basically merge together to make this abomination, and he has all the abilities of the other tunes because he is them. In the mod, you actually have to make the right choice depending on where Hourglass is standing, or you will face the game over screen. And I have to admit, the mechanics really make this mod unique and refreshing. Now there are a few characters in the custom night, such as Mortimer, who is basically just Mouse ABI, which is the depressed version of Mickey Mouse walking down the street in what looks like a storm. And lastly, we have Monkey, who is a character created by Senior Palo, and I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with his Christmas videos because Monkey is actually pretty popular. We also get two different versions of him as well, called Shadow Monkey and Skeleton Monkey, but I don't think there's any actual backstory for these two. With all that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video on the screen here. Subscribe today to become a member of the Orseofkorse, and we'll see you tomorrow with another video.